On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks take on the Miami Heat on Friday evening with the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference playoffs on the line. The winner will go on to face the Cavs. The loser will be going home for the summer. And on the podcast today, I'll be joined by Wes Goldberg of Locked On Heat in crossover fashion for a deep dive into the matchup. All that's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is a Locked On Heat, Locked On Hawks crossover episode, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, the host of Locked On Heat, here with Brad Rowland. He's the host of Locked On Hawks, and we're here to talk about this final play-in game on Friday night. It's for all the marbles. The winner goes to the playoffs. The loser goes home. Before we get to that, a reminder that this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I want to talk about X factors. I want to talk about fear factors. I want to make some predictions later on. But Brad, let's start here. When you look at this game on Friday night, what's the number one thing the Hawks need to do to win?
I'll say, and this is going to be very, very obvious, I'll say make shots. And I'm saying that potentially because everyone has to make shots. That's why it's so funny. But the Hawks just had probably their worst shooting game of the season on Tuesday in a loss to Orlando. And if they don't make shots like they did in that game, they're pretty much dead on arrival. So obvious and also true, Wes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with the play-in tournament, right? It's when the team doesn't, it's the high variance game. It's the dangerous game that we play. You're kind of living on that razor's edge. Several other more metaphors, but that's the Heat shot well in Chicago, specifically Tyler Hero. Duncan Robinson made a bunch of shots. Davion Mitchell went 5 for 5, and the Heat won by 20 points. And that's just sort of what it is. And we can get into the X's and O's and things like that. But specifically with the Hawks, like Trae Young has not played well against Miami this season, or really for his entire career. Trae Young is averaging 17 points per game on 35% shooting against the Heat this season. The Heat have done, for whatever reason, a really good job of limiting Trae Young. And when you kind of cut the head of the snake off, the Hawks have had a harder time figuring things out. Actually, when I looked at the stats, the guys who had the best games for the Hawks against the Heat this season are guys that are not either on the roster anymore or hurt. Jalen Johnson and DeAndre Hunter. So when you look at the Hawks having to make shots, it's going to have to be guys who really weren't making shots against Miami previously. So I know Reza Shea has stepped up lately. There's a lot of other guys. You could talk about somebody like Terrence Mann, who could be a little bit of an X factor off the bench. George Niang has shot well lately for Atlanta, right? So maybe it's just that, but Miami's defense has been dialed in.
Yeah, and Trae Young's ironic. His best game against Miami this year out of the 4 was the game they lost. He shot well in one of the 4 games, and they lost. And yeah, I mean, I was actually tempted to say Trae Young has to play well, but they have beaten Miami with Trae Young not playing well at times. They don't have to have that. But, it's fair to say Miami has been Trae Young's bugaboo for his career, like you said. I mean, it's of all the teams, I think there's maybe one team in the West with a much smaller sample size, but throw that out, Miami is the team that Trae has the worst numbers against in his career. And when you're a one-star team like the Hawks currently are, Jalen Johnson's almost there, but he's not available anyway. So they're clearly a one-star team right now on offense. If your stars don't have a good game, you're behind the 8 ball immediately on offense.
What's the deal with Trae Young right now? He gets ejected in the middle of the 4th quarter against that game in against Orlando. Like, what's the vibe? It kind of, because it felt in the moment that he just quit on the team. I know it was a blowout; the game was pretty much over, but that has to matter a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting because, like, I would have said before that, like, the vibe is probably the best it's been in a long time with Trae Young this year. Like, he seems to be more dialed in. Like, he and Glenn Snyder are seemingly on the same page. Like, he's become more mature, and it's like hard to sell that now because everyone just saw that happen on Tuesday. And I cover the team every day. It's like, I'm sure this happens to you too, where like you say some things and then one time they don't look that way on national TV, and it's like now you're crazy, even though you watch them every single game.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, to his credit, I think by the time they even got to the locker room, he was falling on the sword and apologizing to the team and talking to Quinn. Like, he said all the right things after, which matters, but it doesn't erase it either. I think that's fair to say. If he plays well on Friday and they win, vibes go back to where they were, I have to assume. But anytime that kind of casts a shadow, especially if things don't go well, if he doesn't play well, it's not going to, it's at the very least going to be a talking point outside the locker room. I don't know about inside the locker room where things have been pretty good again all year long, but it didn't look great. Yeah, the game was over, but you can't do that. That's what I said, and thankfully for his sake, he said that right away on the podium after the game. Like, I can't do that. He apologized, but you can't do that if you're the face of the team, face of the franchise, best player, veteran guy, and by the way, their oldest starter, which is funny because he's still a young player. You can't have that be your lasting image of a blowout loss in a game that mattered to you.
What was it that was bothering him? What was it that led to that? Was it just the officiating? Was it Orlando's physicality?
It might have been both. I mean, he didn't really get into that. I think maybe he just got frustrated. But yeah, there was a sequence right before that where he kind of got hip checked by Anthony Black, and maybe he just got rattled. Again, not an excuse. Like, I don't think that he even tried to make one either. Trae and the officials are always an interesting conversation. Like, sometimes he is better with it, sometimes he's not. I think he wasn't getting a lot of calls he wanted in that game, which is not an excuse, but maybe it was they gave up a big run. Like, they got all the way back in the game, they clawed back into the game, and then it was suddenly over. Like, they gave up it was like a 20-point run instantly, and it just kind of snowballed on him. But yeah, I mean, it can't happen. He knows it, and a chance to redeem himself on Friday.
Because if I'm Miami, I'm looking at that and I smell blood in the water. I'm like, okay, the Magic are a physical team. They kind of beat you up. They don't give anything up easily. And the Heat have some guys on their roster that can do very similar things, right? Bam Adebayo, very physical player. They've added Davion Mitchell to the mix. That guy could be very physical out on the perimeter. We've got, if you're the Heat, you're thinking we got Andrew Wiggins, we got Haywood Highsmith. We got a bunch of guys with length that we can kind of throw at Trae Young. And to your point, it's a one-star team. You're really not that worried about getting bit by... Dyson Daniels has had moments where he's got his float game working or whatever, and he's attacking those closeouts off of weaker defenders. Obviously, Reza Shea is really good off the ball, and he can hit some open shots. But I'm not really worried about anybody necessarily. I am worried about one guy, but I'll save that for later. If I'm the Heat, I'm looking at, okay, the Magic got under Trae Young's skin. We're going to try to do the same thing. And specifically, they got to set the tone early in this game. Like, you got to come out and just start fouling the Hawks early. Right? If you're the Heat and try to get the officials to call something and set the tone for what will be a foul and what won't be a foul. And if you're fouling them a bunch early on and the officials aren't calling it, then you've kind of set the tone there and kind of dictate the terms of engagement in that way.
Yeah, I think the Hawks did not handle it well, just even beyond Trae, Orlando's physicality. And look, Orlando is known for that. That's what they do all the time. So it's natural for them. And they kind of take the approach of, we're going to foul and see what they call it, what they don't call it, to your point. Miami isn't quite like that, like Orlando is physicality-wise, but like you said, they can ratchet it up. The Hawks are not as comfortable with that. They don't really have that kind of mentality is the wrong word maybe, but like they don't play that way. They do foul too much, honestly, for a team that has their profile, but it's not in the same way Orlando does. They do create turnovers, but not the same way Orlando does, for instance. So like, yeah, I think the Hawks, I mean, if you're a Hawks fan, you're hoping that you just saw this. Now you expect it. You're going to know, I would hope intentionally, you're going to know Miami's going to probably try the same thing that Orlando did against you. Mm-hmm. And you'll be ready to play through it. You got an extra day. How much does that matter? An extra day to prepare? It matters a little bit, maybe. But you got to know that if you're Coach Snyder on the staff, like they're going to try to be physical with you and you got to be prepared for that. And it's one thing to say it and another thing to actually be prepared for it. But one would think that's pretty obvious, but we'll see if they can play through it.
I'm looking at the box score of the last time these teams played last month and late last month. The Heat won by 10 points. The game was pretty much even. Both teams made a bunch of shots.
Yeah.
Atlanta did get up 41 three-point attempts in that game. To your point about, hey, they got to make shots. They also got to, they'll take the shots, and they're able to get those three-pointers off. Miami only took 33 three-point attempts in that game. Fortunately, they made 18 of their threes, which was the same amount that Atlanta made. I don't know that happens again if you're getting outshot by 8 to 10 attempts per game or in this game against Atlanta again. But going back to the foul part of this, that's how the Heat won the game. They were 16 of 20 from the free throw line. Atlanta was 8 of 10. That's the game. That they're basically the same on turnovers, the same on the Heat shot 54%, Atlanta shot 52%. Like they were both making their shots. It's just that the Heat got to the line, they got those freebies at the foul line, and that swung the game. So the Heat know this, and the Hawks know this. And so the Hawks are going to say, well, we gotta probably keep the fouls down in terms of fouling Miami, but the Heat know we got to make this a physical game because not only do we think that maybe we can get into bother Trae Young a little bit, but also we need these free throws to get to the line and maybe make a difference for us.
Yeah, I noticed, and I was actually going to ask you this at some point. Like I know it's since the Jimmy trade, and part of it's maybe just that Jimmy's not there anymore. the free throw rate's way down for Miami as a team. I'm assuming that's basically just Jimmy not being there. But they're now like bottom 5 in creation and top 5 in preventing free throws. So like they're neutral, but in an extreme way. And the Hawks have fouled more than they've probably gotten in the line, but they're also pretty neutral in that area. So I think that's maybe a sneaky part of the game, to your point, is who takes more free throws. And it's always a part of the game that matters to you. And I'm big on my show in particular, and just my general philosophy about like winning the possession game matters a lot. Like you can't guarantee shooting. It's a make or miss league. It's a trope, but it's true. You can guarantee, or at least help to guarantee, how many shots you get up to the rim. And you mentioned last time the Hawks took so many threes. Probably the biggest offensive issue they had against Orlando, they only got up 21 threes in the whole game. They gave up 12 more attempts to the Magic, who never take threes, than they actually got up. And that's, the Hawks cannot live that way. And I'm sure Quinn Snyder was going to yell at them about that for the next 3 days. So all these little margins, but free throw attempts are definitely one that I'm circling for sure.
I want to get to X factors. I want to talk to you about fear factors. There's one player on the Hawks bench that really scares me. You probably know who it is, but we'll talk about it next here on this Locked On Heat, Locked On Hawks crossover. Today's episode is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with the top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale my business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork, UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. It's Locked On Heat, Locked On Hawks in this special crossover edition ahead of Friday night's play-in game. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Heat. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Hawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. We'll get to fear factors here in a second. We're going to start with X factors. Brad, who's the X factor for Atlanta?
It's Trae Young, but to not repeat myself with Trae Young, I will actually say it might be Mohamed Gay, which would have stunned me as a name to throw out there 2 months ago. He was out in rotation most of the season. He was in the G League for a lot of the season, despite not being on a two-way contract. He's on a full contract, second-year guy. But because of the injuries they've had, because of their state of the front court right now, they're without 3 of their top 4 front court guys. So he is thrust into this role. And honestly, he's been playing pretty well, particularly defensively. He is very important to them. 6'11", rangy, combo big, basically. And number one for me is like, can he stay on the floor? He tends to foul a lot. And number 2 is, can he do anything on offense to stay on the floor? Because I think Quinn Snyder, when all things are equal or even close to equal, tends to lean to offense and I would say have his patience run out with guys who can't help him on offense. And Mo Gay is probably their worst offensive player. Can he be on the floor enough to keep Quinn keep him on the floor? Because if the Hawks want to stop the Heat, they're going to need him to play. So it's a sneaky name, an underrated name, but he's going to start almost certainly. He's been starting the last couple of games for the Hawks, and I'm circling him as a guy who needs to play big minutes, honestly, for the Hawks.
It's a great pick, not only because of all the things he didn't play in the last meeting. He was a DNP-CD, so he is like theXiest of the X factors, right? He was not a factor in that one, and he will be a factor in this one. If he starts, who do you think he guards? Is he getting the Bam assignment, or do they feel good about a Okongwu on Bam, and does he get the Khalil Ware assignment?
Yeah, I think initially because of the way that Miami lines up with Bam and Ware, I'm not entirely sure. Like, for instance, in the Orlando game, they played Orlando twice in a week, and they changed their assignments in the 2 games. The first time around, they had a Okongwu guard Paolo Banchero, which he's not usually going to do, and they had Gay behind the play. In the second meeting, which was the play-in meeting, they had Gay guard Paolo Banchero and had a Okongwu behind the play. So they're comfortable either way. If I had to guess, I think you'll probably see a Okongwu on Bam to start the game. But I don't have a ton of confidence in that. They might try Gay, and it's different because Ware can shoot it the way he can shoot it. You can't just have Okongwu sit up behind the play to have him kind of be that player. So I think maybe being a little bit more quote-unquote straight up with Okongwu on Bam is probably what I would do to start with. But you might see both of those matchups, honestly.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because you could play off of Ware and just dare him to shoot. I mean, he's a rookie, right? It's like, hey, bright lights, make the shot. and that could be an option there. But then maybe he makes the shot, and then you've got a problem. So that could be an issue, especially if you're trying to win the 3-point battle, and that's sort of a key part of your formula here if you're Atlanta. My X factor for Miami is Andrew Wiggins. When he's getting downhill, he puts so much pressure on opposing defenses. Andrew Wiggins might go into like the X Factor Hall of Fame, honestly, because every team that has him says, when Andrew Wiggins plays well, we're kind of unbeatable. But it's true. He was awesome in that playing game against Chicago. He was super aggressive. They had him facilitating out of the post. He was scoring out of the post. He was coming off the screens. He was getting downhill. He was forcing the issue. And when he's getting to the free throw line, again, you go back to Miami's formula, win the free throw battle. Wiggins is going to be a big part of that. He also didn't play. Oh, I'm sorry. He did play in the last meeting, but wasn't very efficient. 16 points on 15 shots. He's averaged 18 points per game against the Hawks this year for Miami, but only shooting 40% overall. So he's going to have to be more efficient, but he's also going to have to be aggressive. So it's balancing the two things. Be aggressive and make sure the looks are good enough where you're getting the shots that you can make. But to me, he's the big X factor, because if he's going and he's putting pressure on Atlanta's wings and he's drawing those fouls and he's getting some of these wings in foul trouble, I just don't know that Atlanta's defense can hold up between him and Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo and everything else that the Heat have.
Yeah, it's a very logical pick. Wiggins, the way you put it is perfect. He's kind of the ultimate X factor for every team he's on in every situation. It's like, if good Wiggins shows up, you're in much better shape. And if he's kind of the passive float along Wiggins.
If good Wiggins shows up, you win the championship, evidently. I
mean, kind of. I don't think it's going to happen to Miami this year. No, my apologies to Heat fans. But hey, the upside is a lot higher when he's right. And that's fair to say for sure. And I think given where the Hawks are with it, they have more wing guys than they have front court players, but they're generally, aside from Ricochet, who's a pretty skinny kid, they're not the most lengthy physical wings. They're kind of smaller wings along the board for the Hawks. So yeah, if Wiggins is assertive, I'll be a little bit worried if I'm the Hawks.
Who's the fear factor you have? So this is somebody on the opposing team that you're just like, hey, it's one game, winner goes home. If that guy just goes off, or if that guy does this one thing, we're kind of screwed.
It's kind of a draw, but I'll just say who it is. Between Duncan Robinson and Haywood Highsmith, I'm going to go with Duncan Robinson, because I feel like he always torches the Hawks, and it happened twice out of the 3 times. He played 3 times this year against the Hawks. Twice he was really good, Duncan Robinson. And if the Hawks have a bugaboo this season, and every Hawks fan's nodding along right now, they give up a lot of 3-point shooting to opponents, both in attempts, but even more so in percentage. And I've been on this crusade all year long, which I'm sure you appreciate, about how it's actually more team control to control attempts than in percentage. Hawks fans don't want to hear that, because the Hawks are like in the bottom 3 and 3-4 percentage allowed, and no one wants to hear that when that's the messaging. But Duncan Robinson's obviously an elite shooter, always has been. And if you lose Duncan Robinson, he can shoot you out of a quarter, out of a half, out of a game. And he's almost too good for this, because he is such a good shooter. And that's why I thought about Highsmith, who's like not that level shooter, but actually had a good game against the Hawks this year in that area where he made a bunch of shots. But I can't not pick Duncan Robinson. I'm a Michigan guy too. It's Duncan Robinson. He scares me to death.
It's a great pick, and he just doesn't need that much space either to get these shots off, right? He's tall. He can get those shots off, and when he's feeling it, he's willing to take those shots too. My fear factor, I have 2, really. First one I don't want to spend a lot of time on, Karis LeVert. That guy, when he's feeling it, he's scored well against Miami. He's got 2 17-point games against the Heat in this regular season series. That's just a thing that you have to be a little worried about. The guy who really scares me is Dyson Daniels. That's the guy who really freaks me out. And maybe you start to he's capable of making a couple of threes. Like if he goes 2 of 3 from 3-point range in a game, you're like, all right, that's something that we didn't really build in to what we were expecting. But when he's really dialed in, he's a guy who can take Tyler Hero out of a game. Now, Hero has played really well against Atlanta this season, despite Daniels. 25 points per game on 48% shooting, 40% on threes. He's also averaging almost 7 assists per game in the regular season against Atlanta. But if Dyson Daniels is ratcheting it up and he's making Tyler's life a living hell, like we saw how important Tyler Hero was in that game against Chicago, 38 points on really efficient shooting. That's why Miami won that game. And if you don't have Tyler Hero, that puts a lot more pressure on guys like Bam, Wiggins, Duncan, and they're really good in those other roles. They're not good in that number 1 scoring role. So Daniels is the guy that freaks me out the most.
It makes sense. I'm sure Miami is going to be trying everything to get him off of Tyler Hero as much as possible.
Yep.
And not that I've not been the biggest hero guy in the past, but I have acknowledged all year long he's been awesome this year. Like awesome, he's at a different level than he's ever been. And I think that even if you play well defensively on him, he can still beat you. We're at that point with Tyler Hero where he's not going to like someone you can just take off the board entirely, even as good as Dyson is. So it's a big X factor. I'm not. I won't say I'm not worried about Tyler Hero because I am, but I think there's some comfort if you're the Hawks in having at least someone you can throw at him. The issue is if Dyson gets foul trouble or anything like that, the next guy behind him is a little bit scared, whether it's Terrence Mann or whoever it is. But yeah, that matchup's obviously one that's everyone's gonna be circling is like, can Dyson at least keep Hero in check? Because if Hero has 35 points, not that the Hawks can't overcome that, but that's going to be a big swing, obviously.
Yeah, Tyler Hero and Trae Young is just sort of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because Trae Young has always been up here. Tyler Hero outplayed him the last time these teams played. Trae Young did have a good game. It was kind of just a shootout between those two guys. And if we kind of get that again, also Dyson Daniels only 2 steals the last time these teams met, which is like half of what he usually gets. So there's that. But you're right. They've been working Tyler Hero off the ball a lot more in these kinds of matchups where, they'll run him through a double drag or they'll just run him off, or they'll have him just do the Steph Curry thing where there's no set play, but he just runs around in circles until the other guy gets tired and loses him. But Daniels is as good as it comes as a chaser, as a guy who disrupts passing lanes, as a guy who can get deflections and all that stuff. All this. But fascinating matchup and 2 teams that have seen a lot of each other over the years. Coming up next, we're going to get into our predictions. Who's going to face the Cavs in the first round? Today's crossover episode of Locked On Heat and Locked On Hawks is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Locked On Heat, Locked On Hawks crossover episode ahead of tonight's final play-in matchup. Winner plays the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round of the playoffs in the 1-8 matchup. The loser, their season is over. Brad, let's get to our predictions here. I want a winner, I want a final score, and I want something else. Tell me something else that's going to happen in the game. Go ahead.
Final score I was not prepared for. I got to think about this in a reasonable way. Okay. Let's acknowledge this. Our friends at FanDuel have the Hawks, I think, is like a 1 point fit. It's basically a coin flip, right? In every possible projection that I've seen.
1 point favorite in Atlanta. Yeah. Yeah,
which means like a slight tinge to Miami and team quality, and that's maybe marginally outweighed by the home court. Anyway, coin flip game. I'm going to pick the Hawks, not with an outrageous amount of confidence, but like a 60-40 level confidence, 55-45 level confidence, something like that. I'll say, to keep it to where these teams have been this year with shot making, and by the way, both teams have shot well against each other this year overall in the 4 matchups. I will go with like basically the over and say 117 to 115, something like that. They'll actually
have the over under in front of you?
Yeah, it's 219 right now.
That's about right.
So that's, basically projected to be 110, 109 in favor of Atlanta is like the projected quote unquote score right now at FanDuel. I'll go a little bit over that on both sides. Close game. I'm picking, like I said, 2-point margin, coin flip kind of game. The other thing that one thing that will happen in the game. Okay. I think Trae Young has a good game, which is not usually a bold prediction, but against Miami, it actually is kind of more bold than it might seem because he doesn't really have great games. The infamous playoff series that you and I both covered a few years ago, where Trae had the worst week of his career, basically, against Miami. And I think, hilariously, because I think Trae gets too much heat now, that was not an intentional pun, too much negative attention in some corners. He didn't get enough for that series. I thought he was awful in that series. It was actually underrecovered, if anything else. Anyway, I think he has a good game, and that's part of the reason why the Hawks win. But it's not going to be comfortable. That's my other maybe sneaky one is like this is a single-digit game either way. It's not a bold prediction, but I'll be surprised if it's just lopsided on either side.
I agree with you there. I think this is going to be a really close game. You've got two teams with a lot of pride here. And I think everybody knows that Miami is prideful because it's sort of their whole thing. They paint it on the court and all that. Atlanta is very prideful. Quinn Snyder is going to have his team way more prepared than I think, frankly, Billy Donovan had his Chicago Bulls prepared for that game. So we know Quinn Snyder's going to have his team prepared. We know Trae Young really kind of relishes these moments. And even just, it was self-created, the getting ejected and everything. Yeah. But then the piling on afterwards is bulletin material for Trae Young. So maybe he galaxy brained his way into bulletin board material. Like, congrats to Trae Young. But he did it. And he's going to be using that as motivation. We know what Trae Young can do when he's, paints himself as sort of a villain, right? Like, that's sort of, he loves being the heel, even though he's doing it kind of, maybe he'd be better off if this game was played in Miami. I don't know. But yeah, I think all those things are true. I'm going to take Miami. I love the spread there. That's really interesting to me. I think they win. And in terms of, I think Tyler Hero has another good game. I think Trae Young has another good game. Frankly, I think this game ends up looking a lot like the last game that these teams played. I think the Heat will get to the free throw line. I think both teams will make a bunch of shots, or at least take a bunch of shots. Who knows if they'll make them. But I think most of these things will be pretty close. But at the end of the day, I think Miami's bench could swing things for them. They got 11 from Highsmith, 16 from Davion Mitchell, and 10 from Kyle Anderson in the last time that these teams played. And it might be the bench that jumps up. So that's going to be my prediction. I think it is Haywood Highsmith. I think he has a big game. I think he hits a couple of threes, maybe hits a runner, a hook shot, some of these other things that it feels like when he hits a couple of these shots in the paint, it just swings everything for Miami. Like, all of a sudden Miami's offense is clicking, and that could be the X factor in this game. So that's my prediction. Haywood Highsmith, double-digit points, Miami Heat win. But it's a close one, I think, to your point too.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, it's still early as we're recording this, but I think that most people that I have seen are picking the Heat. Mm-hmm. I think the Hawks are going to be a very unpopular favorite, quote unquote, to pick in this game, even though they're playing at home. And I mean, we should at least say it. I don't think it matters, but a 10 seed's never made the playoffs, and the Heat are maybe going to do it. We'll see. In fact, there are two chances, and this is a Hawks only thing, but the Hawks have to sweat the other game too for draft purposes. The Grizzlies game on Friday, they don't want the Mavs to win, and they want themselves to win. So a multiple sweat and two. It's the Kings pick. It's very galaxy brain is the word that you used earlier. I'll use it as well. The Hawks need the Kings to not fall below 12 in the lottery. It's a top 12 protected pick. It's just I know that Heat have their own weirdness right now with their picks and conveying years and all. It's that time of year when there's all this weird draft stuff hovering out there. But there are 2 10 seeds with a chance to advance, and no one's ever done it. So maybe the Heat will make history. Hawks will obviously hope not, but they have a chance.
So the Heat have some draft pick stuff. It's obviously under their own control here, but their pick is top 14 protected owed to OKC. So if they win, the moment they win, they lose their pick in this draft, which is kind of an interesting thing.
And if they lose it, don't they lose another one? Like, they lose another one in the future? Isn't one roll over?
So if they lose, then next year's pick is owed to OKC, and it's unprotected completely, which is always a little dangerous and scary.
You don't like unprotected picks. Yeah,
you don't like them.
As someone who's covering a Hawks team that traded 3 years of their draft for a player they no longer have on their roster, you don't like to do unprotected picks generally. So
doesn't help. Brad Rowland, thanks for jumping on this Locked On Heat, Locked On Hawks crossover. For reactions to Friday night's games, you can check out Locked On Hawks. You can check out Locked On Heat. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow the Locked On Podcast Network on your favorite podcast app. And thanks for making us your first listen every day.